Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the F1 show. And guess what? It's another Race Week Live episode because once again, Charlie Tolhurst, it's Race Week. But before
we're in Saudi Arabia this week, Jeddah.
And we discuss all of the Race Week news as well, Charlie. On Monday, it would have been Ayrton Senna's 62nd birthday. Obviously, he died in that horrific crash at Imola on F1's darkest weekend in 1996. 1994. I had to think about that one for a minute. But obviously, Charlie, he was one of the greatest F1 drivers, died so young. Who knows what he would have achieved if he had have been allowed to carry on that career in Formula One. We don't know how he died. Maybe for the better on that one, Charlie.
Yeah, still a lot of unknowns. It was a crash, though, that obviously killed him. It didn't just kill him. Roland Ratzenberger lost his life on the Saturday qualifying.
The axle went through his head, which was what killed him. And funny enough, Charlie, in an interview by one of the doctors, the F1 doctor at the time, who saw to Ayrton Senna
Sid
was
Watkins,
first on the scene, said there was no other injuries to Senna other than the head injury. If the axle didn't go through his head, then he'd have survived it.
Yeah, and that was, I think, Dr. Sid Watkins, I think, at the time as well, who actually tried to save Senna.
And obviously, you have to put your thoughts to Sid Watkins on that weekend, Charlie. Nothing he could really do on both of those drivers' circumstances. Obviously, Roland Ratzenberger died the day before as well.
Yeah, honestly, that weekend, I remember when we get to sort of April, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, I'm sure many tributes will be paid.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, it being so close to the anniversary of the death this year as well. Obviously, last year was a bit before, but this year, we're actually only, 2 weeks away, I think, from the anniversary that we race at Imola. So definitely F1 should pay some kind of tribute to Roland and Ayrton that weekend. But moving on to the brighter things, it's race week and we go back to Jeddah.
Yeah, we'll talk about Bahrain in a minute and all the reaction to that. But yes, Jeddah back on the calendar again. There had been a missile strike in Jeddah this week, but Formula One have announced that they will be racing this weekend at the Jeddah Corniche circuit.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk surrounding this Grand Prix. Should it happen? Should it not? Obviously, the missile strike, like you said, Charlie, that was actually just outside. That was just outside of Saudi Arabia, actually in Iran. Obviously, horrible thing to happen. And all of the things that are going on in the world right now. And also, there's been a lot of talk where the track is, Charlie. It's just outside of the famous square. Well, the famous square for all the wrong reasons, where they execute people in Saudi Arabia. They executed 81 men last week. So there are questions. Should F1 be going there? Stefano Domenicali said he wants F1 to still go there to get that message of human rights across.
It's an interesting one. I suppose financially for Formula One, they probably think it's the right thing to do.
Well, maybe they do. And obviously, we are going to more of these Middle East countries where there are some human rights problems. And F1 is driven to solve these problems. And it believes it can solve these problems by racing in these countries and bringing attention to these countries by the other governments. And I think a lot of the fans agree with this decision, Charlie, as well.
Yeah, I think the fans obviously want Formula One to race in other countries. I mean, they obviously know the Middle East is very popular. Obviously, Bahrain is a very popular Grand Prix, and we know that Qatar was on the calendar last year. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Formula One promotes it.
That next year as well.
Yeah, obviously not this year because of the World Cup, unfortunately. The football is in that slot.
Yeah, and Qatar's such a small country, it's not possible for it to host two big events at one time. But before we really dissect Jeddah, let's talk about that last weekend, Charlie, because it was the first weekend of new cars and it was a great race and there was lots of good overtaking. But the safety car went in, Charlie, and all of a sudden Red Bull's engines went bang.
Yes, they did. Red Bull lost 2 cars within the space of a few laps. Firstly, Max Verstappen claimed his steering was bent or something, and then Sergio Perez spun at turn 1 on the last lap.
Well,
Engine shut down.
the steering wasn't actually what caused the issue. The steering when the car was dropped from the jacks at Max Verstappen's pit stop just before the safety car, it dislodged the track rod, which I don't think I've ever seen before in Formula One, and it slightly meant his steering was slightly out of sync. And then obviously they retired the car just after the safety car restart, and we still don't know at this moment in time. Red Bull say they still don't know what caused the engine to cut off, and that is a big concern, Charlie, considering it happened on both cars. Going into this weekend, they don't know what caused that problem.
No, it's not a good weekend if you had Honda engines as well, because Pierre Gasly broke down as well.
Which is what caused Bernd Mailander's intervention in the first place.
Yeah, Red Bull and Honda. Red Bull obviously still run the Honda factory for supplying powertrains. So yeah, not a great weekend for them cars.
But what do you think of this, Charlie? The new race director is deploying the virtual safety car before he deploys the full safety car. All I can imagine is because he wants the drivers to slow down enough so that the safety car isn't entering a racetrack where we potentially have cars going full speed.
Yeah, I suppose it's a safety feature they're doing this.
But do you agree? Do you think introducing the virtual safety car for 10 seconds, then the full safety car is a better solution than just having Bernd Mailander drive out onto a track where we could potentially have drivers still going full speed?
I suppose it's unique. Will it work? I don't know. I'd have to check again with the rule book on that one.
Yeah, and this time, the new race director did decide he was going to follow the unlapping rules correctly, unlike Michael Massey last year, because he did wait the one lap. They did let the lap cars go through, but the race director instructed Bernd Mailander to stay out for another lap, which is what Massey should have done if he wanted to let the lap cars through. A lot of people saying it's Christian Horner's karma was that weekend for Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was certainly what he got paid back for that race last year in Abu Dhabi, I think.
And what did you make of these new cars for the first time? Obviously, Sebastian Vettel missed out because he did test positive for COVID on Thursday, which meant Nico Hülkenberg came back into the car. But, Charlie, we do have to mention Gunther Steiner was finally a smiler. What a result that was for Haas.
Yes, well, I thought the cars were good, actually. Overtaking was pretty decent. I thought they followed a lot closer. Kevin Magnussen, though, 5th place after all the drama at the end of the race. Can I just say, welcome back to the sport if you're Kevin Magnussen.
5th place as well, Charlie. And listen to this. Haas are 3rd in the constructors' standings.
Yeah. I mean, Mick Schumacher finished 11th in the end. I'll get the standings up in a minute, but yeah.
And another standout performance, Charlie, on his Formula One debut, Zhou Guanyu scoring points as well in a double point scoring finish for Alfa Romeo.
Yes, 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 Zhou Guanyu, or as he used to be known as Guanyu Zhou. Yes,
I think he
10th
swapped
place.
his name around, Charlie, for Formula One to Zhou Guanyu.
Interesting. It's an interesting one, but yes, 10th place for him. Wow, I never even thought he was going to make the points, and I think he got through to Q2 as well, by what I heard.
He did, and he only just missed out on Q3, which Mick Schumacher did as well. So, obviously, Charlie, I actually think Mick could get that Q3 if he goes for it in Jeddah, and I really do see Mick Schumacher having a strong season this year. I thought he was unlucky in Bahrain not to score some points.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, though, that Haas looks a lot better this year, I think, with the car. It just looks a lot better. I just think the team, hopefully, they've got a drive. I think this could, hopefully, I might hope being a bit too optimistic here. I hope this is the team's best year in the sport.
But obviously, Gunter Steiner, that whole Haas team has been through so much in the past 2 years where they've been so slow. And they abandoned last year's car at about August because they wanted to focus their attentions on the new car rather than this car.
Yeah, Jack, I have to say, I think mentally for Haas, they need to get a car that is going to win them, get them points. And I just think they decided, you know what, we had such a rubbish season last year. We're going to turn it around, develop the car for this year. And I think they've actually got themselves a reward now with a great finish for Kevin Magnussen.
And it looked quick as well, didn't it? Throughout the whole weekend, it looked a really good car to handle.
Especially qualifying as well. Mercedes, George Russell's slower than a Haas, which I thought was quite surprising.
So let's talk about Mercedes. They did have a terrible weekend. But I think if you'd have offered Lewis Hamilton a podium at the start of it, he'd have bitten your arm off. They did get a bit lucky, Charlie, but we did say last week on the F1 show, Mercedes have to be there to pick up the scraps, and that is exactly what they did.
Yeah, I was writing on social media about the weekend about Mercedes, and yeah, very mixed weekend. Luckily, finishing third and fourth with Hamilton and Russell, but yeah, they need to. I think they need to get, if they want to get themselves back in the championship, they're going to have to look massively at updating their car, especially technical aspects as well. Because I think Andrew Shovlin, one of their technical directors, was saying that they were lacking in some low speed corners at all with grip.
I think the problem is with Mercedes, they're experiencing the porpoising, which is where the car's going like that. And the problem is they're not actually on their straight line speed, on their top speed, that they are quick. But the car is hitting the ground. We didn't see it in Barcelona and they were quick. And it's hitting the ground and that is costing them time. So I heard from a Mercedes spokesman, and Sky Sports were reporting this on Monday, that Mercedes are bringing a new upgrade to Imola, which will hopefully, they think they've found the keyhole to their problem and it will stop the porpoising. But that car, Charlie, on some laps, when they got it together, did look quick over the weekend.
It did. George Russell had a pretty good start in it as well. I think, but the car, if Mercedes can get the car developed over the first couple of races, I think they've got a chance. But Ferrari, though, I think are in a different league.
Do you think so? Or do you just think the others weren't competitive?
I don't know. I mean, Ferrari, though, I think they surprised me with their straight line speed. They were very fast. I think Charles Leclerc was very quick that weekend. He was one of the drivers of the weekend for me. Just pace, everything. I think, though, some of the other teams were a bit underperforming.
See, for me, I think Bahrain very much suits the Ferrari cars. It has done in the past on how they've set them up. I think when we go to Jeddah, it suits the Red Bull slightly more, and obviously the Mercedes, but the Mercedes isn't competitive for race wins at the moment. We all know that. So I think Jeddah will certainly suit the Red Bull car a bit more than the Ferrari. So I think that's when we will get that real gauge. But obviously, Charlie, Max Verstappen, 0 points. That's not the way you want to start the season. 25 points behind the championship leader on your first effort to defend your world championship status.
Yeah, it isn't ideal. So I've got the standings up for you here, guys. Just going to quickly run through them whilst we're here now. So obviously Leclerc won with Sainz for second, Hamilton third, Russell fourth, Magnussen, as we mentioned, fifth, Bottas sixth, Ocon seventh, Tsunoda eighth, Fernando Alonso ninth, and Zhou Guanyu was 10th. The first lap, though, did see a collision between Ocon and Schumacher. I think Schumacher was unlucky in the end with what happened. I think Ocon, though, penalty for him. Do you think that was fair?
See, under the new regulations, it says that if you're not alongside the car, then it is your fault. But for me, it was the first lap. It was a bit tight. It was a chaotic first lap, crazy first lap. I think it was a bit harsh to give Ocon that penalty.
Yeah, you have to watch the replay back again. I'd have to watch the replay back to find out. I mean, it was a very narrow corner. I think, was there a gap for Ocon to go there, or was there just too many cars? I mean, it's very difficult. If you sort of, maybe the stewards were a bit concerned of Ocon's positioning probably going into, I think, turn 6 it was, where they collided.
The first lap in Bahrain, it always is chaos. I don't really know what more Ocon could have done there, because he had cars to the left of him, to the right of him, behind him. If he backed out, someone probably would have ploughed straight into the back of him. So you have to look at it. What was there that Ocon could have done?
Yeah, I think in the end of it, I think they probably, if I was probably giving a race director, I probably would have just slapped it as a racing incident. Because if you had nowhere to go, then you got to make whatever effort you can to get out of the way.
So obviously, we did have F2 on the weekend. We don't normally talk about F2 on this show, but miraculously, Charlie, 2 cars crashed in the pit lane separately at the same point, same time. That can only ever happen in F2.
I heard about this. I haven't watched the F2 races at the weekend, but I heard about that a couple of drivers crashed in the pit lane, which I have to say is a very bizarre incident. I've not seen that in a Formula One race, I think, since like 2011 or something.
Well, Bottas spun in the pits last year at Austria, if you remember that, and actually got a penalty for that in practice. But maybe just say Alex Jakes and Davide Valsecchi, it is the best commentary duo that there is in motorsport.
Yeah, Davide Valsecchi is obviously a former GP2 champion, so he knows the sport like the back of his hand. And yeah, I think Alex Jakes certainly is a man who does Channel 4. Yeah, I think those two are probably...
Well, obviously, Davide Valsecchi does Sky Sports F1 Italia as well.
Yeah.
So got a lot of experience. But let's move on. This weekend, Jeddah, the Jeddah Corniche circuit, it's fast, it's flowing, but it's also dangerous, Charlie. And that is what the drivers love about this circuit.
Yeah, and your name is Mick Schumacher from last year, binning it at turn 22. So, yeah, turn 22 is not going to be changed that much by what I'm hearing. So look out for turn 22. Very fast corner on that circuit, can punish anyone if you get it wrong.
It is, and like any street circuit, but more so this street circuit, one mistake, you're finding a wall.
Yes, if you're Max Verstappen from qualifying last year, another example of binning it for pole position.
And really, unless you crash at turn 27 or turn 1 and 2, you're having a high-speed impact as well.
Yeah, I think that the runoff at Jeddah is quite limited as well in some places. There is not much runoff, so getting cars cleared is going to be challenging. You probably would have to throw out some sort of safety car if that was to happen.
Do you think, well, I know it's a bit of a stupid question, but there's going to be a safety car this weekend, do you think?
Probably in it. It's probably going to be inevitable. A red flag, questionable as well.
It could be. It could be questionable because obviously it is very, very tight as well. So it's hard to get the cars cleared. And as we saw last year, it's very easy to get a track blockage as well.
Yeah, and it's a race that I think it's about, I'm not sure how many laps we got for this one. I think it's a longer, much
50 laps.
50?
Yeah, it's the second longest circuit on the Formula One calendar behind Circuit Spa-Francorchamps.
50-lap race. God, anything will happen in 50 laps.
50 laps, and probably one of the most physical races of the season on the drivers as well.
Yeah, it is going to be a hot one as well for the drivers. I think they're going to be in for a hot and humid race. Certainly very muggy temperatures at night as well. This is going to put a lot of strain on them and probably on the car as well.
Well, we obviously did see Lewis Hamilton and I'm pretty sure most other drivers as well, training in the Dubai heat at about midday, because that gave them a rough approximate of what the temperature is going to be. The race temperature is up to 31 degrees track temperature, and the air temperature will be around 25 degrees is what they're predicting. That is at the time of lights out, 25 degrees, and that is when the sun is set.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as hot as... Well, it's going to be hotter than Bahrain, I think. Bahrain was quite a fairly cool one, I think, for what I saw. So, yeah.
It was for Bahrain. And obviously, it's not that physical either. Jeddah, it's fast. It is flowing. The corners come after you, one after another for the whole lap.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's going to be interesting to see how the racing unfolds this weekend, because, of course, DRS is another important factor as well.
Well, there was questions, wasn't there, last year, whether you would be able to overtake. I think it proved you could. You can overtake on this circuit into turn 1, turn 27, and if you're really feeling brave, the bank turn 13 as well.
Yeah, there was a couple of moves last year at that corner, but it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, I think the DRS zones are staying the same, so it's going to be interesting.
Yep, we will have 3 DRS zones. Obviously, turn 27, turn 1, the main straight, and that little bit around the middle of the track as well, why there's a DRS zone, because you cannot overtake there unless you both want to end up in the turn 22 barrier.
Yeah, I thought they'd put that into 13, the DRS, because you've got a bank corner there, but interesting position. Maybe it's sort of to get them ready for 27.
It might be. There has been some slight adjustments to the crash barriers in regards to if a car has gone off. We saw sometimes last year cars going off and rebounding back onto the racetrack. The crash barriers have been designed so that shouldn't happen. But obviously in Formula One, Charlie, if the car hits the barrier at the wrong angle, it can happen still.
Yeah, and with this track as well, Jack, unfortunately, because there's a lack of runoff, you're going to go straight onto the racing line, and that, if another car comes around at high speed, that could be potentially dangerous.
Well, not only for the drivers as well, Charlie, but for the marshals as well. And obviously, we do have to say a massive thank you to the marshals, like we do every single weekend, those Bahraini marshals. They had a bit of a scare, Charlie, when they saw Pierre Gasly's AlphaTauri go up in flames at turn 3. And ironically, it was the exact same marshals post, obviously had to really get out of that way in 2020.
Yeah, that one. Turn 3 once again becomes another victim, only for an engine failure this time. But still, that AlphaTauri was on fire, by the sounds of it.
It was, and obviously, well done to the race director. Very quick reactions to get the safety car on track, and burnt mine under in that new Mercedes GT Black as well, Charlie. It looked really, really smart, didn't it?
Yeah, the new Mercedes AMG GT Black Series out. I must admit, if you see one on the road, I bet they're decent to drive. So yeah, by the way, that's only coming from someone that drives anyway, so that's going to be very interesting. Glad to see it on the grid.
Glad to see it on the grid, Charlie. I'd like to know F1's cash bill on that one, though, to be
Yeah, if you got me, I tell you what, I hope one day, sign me up, wherever you need me, pass my driving test, I'll drive your safety car for you.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't mind driving an Aston Martin Vantage or Mercedes GT Black Series. But for the final 5 minutes, we're going to dissect Stefano Domenicali's statement today, which says he hopes that F1 can return to South Africa as early as next year, the Kyalami circuit. He also hopes F1 can stage a race at Las Vegas. Obviously, Las Vegas is famous for holding the only F1 race in the car park at Caesar Palace. He also thinks, Charlie, that in the next 5 years, we can see a 30-race calendar.
What is this man thinking of? Is he thinking to bring Formula One to infinity and beyond or something? This is a ludicrous plan to race 30 times. I tell you what, though, if he can pull it off, I bet he'll get so much money in his bank for it.
Do you know what, Charlie? Why not? why not let him give it a go? Because for us fans, we want as many races as we can. For the drivers, yeah, you could say 23 is maybe too many. 25 is definitely pushing it. But where do you stop? Because we're now looking, okay, 30 races a year. We're pretty much going to have to do all of them back to back to get any weeks off. And even if we'd done that, we'd only get, what would it be? Just under 2 months off. So what are we saying? Starting the F1 season in January? Or February?
probably going to have to be then. I think as well, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the teams to design their cars. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the mechanics in terms of being away from their families and all the personnel. So, yeah, this season this would be a mammoth season for everyone.
Well, just looking at next season quickly, obviously this season finishes slightly early because F1 doesn't want it to clash with the FIFA World Cup being held in the Middle East. With potentially seeing a 25 race calendar next year, obviously we think Turkey may be back permanently in the Agora drive stop because Russia has had that contract ripped up. We think Kyalami could be back. Qatar's coming back to the calendar. Saudi Arabia will still be on there. We don't think Las Vegas as early as next year. We could really, Charlie, be seeing the season starting up at the beginning of March, late February.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Las Vegas, though, I can't think of many places in Las Vegas to hold a race. There is a circuit they use for NASCAR, but Formula One will want a circuit, I suppose.
Formula One was talking about making it a temporary circuit, a street track. I think that was what the plans were. Because obviously, the only recognisable track Formula One could use is Laguna Seca.
Yeah, mind you, I have to say for Laguna, I think that's going to be not very. It's very narrow to overtake there. It would have to corkscrew, but it
doesn't even have pit building, to be honest, Charlie. Because IndyCar they don't use pit building, so Laguna Seca would definitely have to undergo a lot of construction changes.
Yeah, and the circuits for Formula One would be over within a minute because of how quick it is as well. Especially that first sector.
It's a very short lap as well. But I don't know. Do you want to race in Las Vegas?
I think it'd be interesting. Obviously, I know Miami are doing this temporary built street circuit, so they could pull it off. Maybe it'd be huge.
Maybe. But obviously, you do have to look at it. 25 races. That is not so much a lot for the drivers because they fly around in their private jets. They have the luxury, but the personnel, the mechanics, all of the staff within F1 that work, the camera crews, the pit crews, the catering staff, 25 weeks away from home. That's a lot, Charlie.
Yeah, mental health as well will be huge for mental health. They're going to be missing their families. But I do think if the sport wants to expand, let them expand. Because I just think Formula One is going to need to attract a bigger worldwide audience, I think.
Do you think it only cares about money? Or do you think it's not like that?
I think Formula One is like a family sometimes, but also as well, I think they really want to build the financial burdens and show other countries what they're capable of.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Charlie, for the F1 show this week. Race Week Live. We'll be back with just the F1 show next week because it isn't a race week, but we'll be dissecting all of that news from Jeddah. So join us then. But until then, bye-bye.